Hi, everybody. Jim Havlin again. This is another of our conversations talking to winners of OhioX's Next25 awards. I was very happy to see Dr. Christa Pawlowski recognized as she is rarely in the spotlight, which we talk about, represents an important set of talents needed in any entrepreneurial ecosystem. She is brilliant in science and engineering, but is absolutely dedicated to being a great leader, which is a discipline in and of itself. Enjoy my conversation with Dr. Christa. Well, welcome everybody. This is Jim Haviland with Weekly Impact by Lay of the Land. And today I am very fortunate to have Dr. Christa Pawlowski with me. She is a winner recently of the Next25 award. And we're going to be talking about Haima Therapeutics and Alnair Therapeutics. Dr. Christa, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with a brief overview. I know Michael Bruckman from Haima was on the larger Lay of the Land show.
Right, right.
They did a good long conversation there. I'll reference that in our podcast. But you've been behind the scenes with that one, and also Allinaire. So give me a little bit of your story arc that got us to where we are today.
Sure. So I'm a transplant to Cleveland. I came up here for school at Case Western Reserve University, starting as an undergrad, but continued all the way through my
Yeah.
PhD at Case in the Biomedical Engineering department. So always really excited about how we can apply engineering principles and innovation to treat human health issues. And so after finishing up my PhD there, I was really excited by the research that I was doing in Dr. Anirban Sengupta's lab, creating novel therapies for a variety of indications, one of them being a drug to stop bleeding. Got some really exciting data as a grad student, and I couldn't live with the fact of abandoning that and moving on to something else. So I convinced him to start Haima Therapeutics with me to see if we can translate that to the clinic.
So you were radicalized by the outcomes.
I was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
And in the meantime, as I was kind of getting Haima off the ground, I joined a local biotech accelerator called Biomotive, which was the for-profit arm of the Harrington Project run by Beju Shah, and basically was brought on to run operations on a few of their startup companies. So they would find interesting IP, new novel therapeutics from the universities, license that IP, form a startup company, and I ran operations on two of them. One was a cancer vaccine company, and the other was monoclonal antibody for cardiopulmonary diseases. So actually still working with that company called Alnair Therapeutics to this day, trying to make a drug to treat pulmonary hypertension and COPD and other cardiopulmonary diseases.
I like my work because I get to feed my curiosity. And I think thinking about today's show, I learned a lot about things I had this is kind of like you're working in a territory that is the subgenre of a subgenre to some extent. It's interesting to me because you seem like an operator, but you've clearly been radicalized by with this entrepreneurship gene. So
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit about that. So the interesting part about Haima was that, you started with Dr. Gupta, then you brought in a new CEO. Tell me about that journey a little bit. How'd you make that decision?
So when we first started the company, we were really trying to get funding through non-dilutive sources. We have a drug that stops bleeding. Obviously, there's a lot of interest from the military. And so as we were writing our proposals and trying to get in our first funding through non-dilutive sources, that's when I joined Biomotive. So when the first funding hit, I had to figure out what I was going to do with these two full-time positions.
Yeah.
So
There's only
actually,
so much time.
yeah, only so much time. And, I knew Mike Bruckman. He was a postdoc at Case Western in a neighboring lab, also doing nanoparticle research. And he was in the area with a saliva glucose device startup. So he kind of was already getting into the startup space. And so we brought him on to kind of take the lead in the company while I was working with Biomotive. And he's done a good job at kind of getting the company off the ground and getting our funding in. And honestly, I'm much more an operator than a outward facing CEO type anyway. So it better suits my skill set.
Yeah, well, and there's one of the things I noticed about you, and I obviously know your husband, and I had a sense of you you're really pulling some strings behind a bunch of really cool things going on,
Mhm.
but that makes you comfortable. That's more comfortable than the alternative.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a scientist by training. I'm
Okay.
deep in the weeds of the technology and the technical side of things. But I also just like to get stuff done. That's kind of my personality, is if there's a problem, I solve it, I get it done. And that's, a lot of the times behind the scenes.
Right. Well, and I want to talk a little bit about your, the business acumen, but I
Mhm.
think the Ohio X recognition. So I was happy to see it because there's actually some good research on this being done now in the sociology space around how in Americans we've done this weird thing where we've made heroes out of the single genius behind things,
Mhm.
and I know that ideas are nearly worthless if you can't execute on them.
Mhm.
So I was really happy to see you get recognized. So, but tell me about what you think about as far as being part of the next 25 for class of 2025. What do you
Yeah.
attribute that to?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an honor to be on that list. I was really happy that, it brought highlight to not only my company at Haima, but also the broader biotech ecosystem.
Hmm.
In Ohio, we have amazing universities spinning out great innovations. And we don't have, especially in the therapeutic space, we don't have those big pharma players in the area. So really the lifeblood of the biotech the ecosystem is these small startups that are taking ideas, turning them into products, getting
Right.
them to a point where they can hand it off to a transition partner or maybe take it all the way along the lines. And so it's really nice to be able to highlight that in a broader setting.
I appreciate that, and I want to point out probably not the intent, the calling it lifeblood, but it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too because I think we talk a lot about in the entrepreneurial space. I know Jeffrey talks about this in his show, and I talk about it in mine, where there's that notion of density of talent, density of expertise, and we do have the knowledge base. But I've also pointed out many times that there is the roadmap to commercialization
Hmm.
is part of it, and turning to have an ecosystem of businesses that can actually regenerate on a regular basis, you need to
Hmm.
have that exit as well. I
Yep.
mean, and that's the thing that we're maybe kind of missing is that guy who's going to buy us all,
Yep.
uh, right? And so when you think about people who are going to commercialize Hema, they're located, Germany and Philadelphia. Where
Mhm.
are they all?
Yeah, the big players in kind of our space are on the coasts
Okay,
and other
yeah,
countries. I think that this could be done a couple of ways. Like we could take it across the finish line. I
mm,
think there's a story to be told about growing the business in Ohio. We're great for manufacturing, like bringing the manufacturing of our product into the state. I think it's possible, but I think the economics of it is where the challenge is. There's not a huge funding base for life science technologies in the region. There's a few small players that help
got
at
it.
the early stage, but I mean, it takes hundreds of millions of dollars to get products
Right.
like this to the market. So you have to rely on those partners that are elsewhere. But my goal would be to keep as much as we can take it from our Ohio, in our
Yep.
backyard as far as we can. That's the goal.
But, I mean, it's almost impossible, right? Because I think there's
Yeah.
even when you get to an absolute this guaranteed works reliably all the time, you're still a decade away from commercialization. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, if we once we get into kind of mid-clinical development, phase 2 into phase 3,
Okay.
we're maybe 5 years from the market. I
Okay.
think for a product specifically for Haima, there's opportunities for commercialization a lot sooner than other therapeutics. Like we're going after a veterinary
Hmm.
product right now. It's a totally synthetic
I love
platelet
that.
analog, so it works across species. So we're looking to develop it and commercialize it for companion animals. And that pathway is much shorter, and we can start generating revenue in the next several years to kind of support the later stage clinical development. But also, there's opportunities for, because it is this is kind of a breakthrough technology, like there's ways to get approval to use it in certain scenarios before getting full market approval with the
Got it.
FDA. So we're
Sure.
exploring like emergency use authorization in the event of a major conflict, military
Sure.
conflict, or mass casualty event.
We
So
seem
there's
to have
ways to
plenty
there's
of those
ways to get it
around.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As,
Yeah.
as the world gets scarier, yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's ways to kind of, be strategic about trying to get it on the market as quickly as possible to be able to generate revenue and kind of
Brilliant.
support the full development.
Well, I appreciate that. And I guess I have a sense too, unlike when you spoke, that there's some lot of support for the early stages of this, but the middle ground is where we get stuck in
Right.
biomed, right? So because that's the long slog.
Right.
Um, right now, like if you had more funding, could you move faster towards those things? Is that really
Ab
the
Yeah, absolutely. I think the
okay?
COVID vaccines are a great example of what,
You're right.
almost unlimited funding can do on development timelines. I think a lot of things can be done in parallel instead of in series. But there's a critical path. We have to demonstrate that it is safe in humans before
Right.
moving into showing that it works. There's a clearly defined regulatory pathway that we have to follow, and more resources just make it a little bit easier to do that.
And in other places, how does that work? I mean, what would be I'm going a little bit outside what we typically ask about, but I'm curious, like if we were gonna, hey, if Krista had the magic wand for the moment and could actually make some resources happen here, it isn't just about money though. It's about
Mhm.
people paying attention to what's going on and
Yep.
finding those resources. And what does that look like in other places as far as you know?
The ecosystem in Boston, for example, is
Yeah.
really good for therapeutics companies. I mean, we've been around for about 8 years. And we could have gone faster, probably with more resources. We, brought in funding kind of tranched here and there. I think in places like Boston, where there are investors who invest more in that early stage risky
Okay.
technology and they give
Right.
a lot of funding in bigger chunks, it can accelerate that process. And then the strategics are being able to form a partnership with a big pharma company that then funds the R&D and kind of keeps their eye on the technology until it gets to a point where they either want to acquire it or take it on to lead the later stage development. I think having the
Yeah.
connection points with those strategic partners and investors is really an accelerator as well.
And I've made the point many times that it isn't like there isn't money in Cleveland. We just have to be able to prove that there's a way of making it back.
Yeah, yeah,
And, even I've worked with some new funds when they come up, it's like until that IRR make starts to show up,
yeah,
dude, I don't you're asking for a lot of faith.
yeah.
I don't know that we have too many really great stories in
Yeah, there's not a
Cleveland.
lot to point to. Yeah.
Uh, but not that that kind of intelligence doesn't really have a locus except to we put it on there. So tell me a little bit about what you kind of learned in this journey. I mean, you're getting a lot of things done, Krista, and my sense is you probably have some great advice for 2015 Krista on uh,
Oh,
where to focus and where not to
yeah.
focus. Do you have any advice for 10 years ago, Krista?
Yeah, I think really the biggest surprise, and I'm like a scientist, by heart and training, and I am very analytical. I more recently have just realized how important team culture and the soft
Mm,
skill side of the business really impacts the outputs. So,
yeah.
building a team and making the culture is not something that just happens. It's something you have to actively cultivate. And when the team, they trust each other, they work, they rely, everyone's accountable, like the team is so much more functional and gets stuff done so much quicker and
Yeah.
is happier. And I learned along the way to put more energy and effort into cultivating that.
You've mentioned a number of, leadership buzzwords that I hammer into my clients on a regular basis, but actually how we put it and how I put it all the time is like, you have a culture automatically, that comes, but do you have an intentional culture?
Right.
Right? Do you have the culture that you really wanted? Rituals, artifacts, and language are what sociologists tell you go
Mm,
into a culture, and you get to choose those things when you're starting an organization. Like,
yep.
what are our rituals, artifacts, and language? And I love the way you said trust because it is the leading indicator of a successful organization is trust building. So
Yep.
that's great. We'd like to ask the question about mentors and mistakes. Any big mistakes to call out? Any mentors you want to name?
I've had several great mentors over the years. I think the biggest impact that I learned from my mentors and has kind of translated to me being a leader is whenever you show your team that you respect their time and
Mhm.
effort and energy. In a startup, we're going 100 miles an hour,
Right.
and there's always things to do. But I think urgency is constant and burnout's real with everybody. But I've had mentors that have said, we need to get this done over the weekend. I'm really sorry to interrupt on your time. Or if it's something they send out, like, don't look at this until Monday, just having that like
Yeah.
respect for somebody's time really makes them respect you and want to do their best for you. And that's something I learned from a really great mentor that I had while working. Well, I still work with him at Allinaire. Douglas Hay is the CEO, and he was always very, acknowledging that it's hard and respectful of the effort and energy I put out. And it makes me want to, do 10 times more for him.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We use a couple of phrases we use for that. We want to turn our expectations into agreements.
Hmm.
One of our favorites is Brene Brown, clarity is kind. So
Yep.
being clear with people and attaching it all back to the why. I mean, that's, we're building businesses and we have to get things done. It's
Yep.
like, hey, folks, I'm going to ask you to rally now because we have to get this done by this
Yep.
timeline for this reason. I think that's, it goes a long way because you're already bought in. If you're working on a startup, you're already a true believer. And,
Yeah.
but acknowledging that it is hard is really impactful. I appreciate that. Any individuals you want to call out as you walk across the dais and accept your award here?
No.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks to the
as
Academy.
everyone,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I think, having a Anirban Gupta Case has been a great advisor. I learned a ton from my team at Biomotive. Lizzie Berezovsky was a great mentor to me there.
Mm,
Douglas Hay, I mentioned. Tim Pelora, who I met at Biomotive and now is actually our executive chair at Haima. Just,
brilliant.
I've met a lot of good people along the way that have helped build me up personally. And my husband actually is the one who really forces me to do things like this interview or to get
I
out there.
for the record, I did yank his chain a little bit. Say, hey man, what's Krista up to?
Yeah, he's my biggest supporter, right?
Well,
And
and I think, for me, it's important that people like you get recognition because it is the operationalizing of brilliance. It's 90% of the work, right? Having a
yeah,
great idea, it's going to sit in the lab forever unless someone picks it up and runs with it. So I appreciate you, Krista. I appreciate
yeah.
your time today,
And
and
one
what you're
more
working
thing,
on.
I would be remiss
Yeah.
if I didn't mention my team. I can
Oh
come up
yeah.
here and tout all of our accomplishments, but like without the team who's actually running the experiments, doing the data analysis, like the company is nothing. So I have an amazing team.
Well, and I trust you're doing a good job building that team and nurturing them along the way. And we'll look to see them also create new things as Haima becomes successful. So,
Yeah.
well, great, Krista. Thanks so much for the time today. I really appreciate it, and best of luck. I think you're doing great stuff.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Jim.
Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.